In 1926, a 22-year-old student named J. Robert Oppenheimer is studying for his doctorate at the University of Cambridge under experimental physicist Patrick Blackett. However, Oppenheimer faces challenges dealing with anxiety and homesickness. Blackett, not impressed with Oppenheimer, constantly insults him. In response, Oppenheimer considers playing a prank on Blackett with a poisoned apple but decides against it. After seeking advice from visiting scientist Niels Bohr, Oppenheimer decides to pursue theoretical physics at the University of Göttingen. At Göttingen, Oppenheimer completes his PhD and meets fellow scientist Isidor Isaac Rabi. They later encounter theoretical physicist Werner Heisenberg in Switzerland. Eager to advance quantum physics research in the United States, Oppenheimer starts teaching at the University of California, Berkeley, and the California Institute of Technology. He gets married to biologist Catherine Kitty Puning and becomes involved in an on-and-off affair with Jean Tatlock, a troubled communist who tragically dies, apparently by suicide. During this time, Oppenheimer leans toward leftist political views, incorporating them into his teachings. Unbeknownst to him, the FBI is investigating him. He advocates for professors' unionization on campus, causing tension with those who appreciate him for his scientific work. Oppenheimer contributes to the Spanish Civil War through the Communist Party, viewing fascists as a greater threat than socialists, which goes against the prevailing opinion at the time. Despite his involvement, Oppenheimer never formally joins the Communist Party. In December 1938, scientists discover nuclear fission, a process Oppenheimer initially believed couldn't happen. However, when he sees the results of a replicated experiment in the US, he realizes the potential for a chain reaction in fission, understanding it could be used to create a bomb. As Hitler invades Poland in 1939, Oppenheimer, who was once neutral, changes his stance and wants to help defeat the fascists. During World War II in 1942, U.S. Army Colonel Leslie Groves recruits Oppenheimer, who is of Hebrew descent, to lead the Manhattan Project for developing an atomic bomb. Oppenheimer is primarily concerned that the German nuclear research program, led by Heisenberg, might create a fission bomb for the Nazis. Their hope lies in the possibility that Hitler might see quantum physics as a Hebrew science, potentially denying Heisenberg the resources needed for his work. Oppenheimer requests Groves to establish the lab at Los Alamos, bringing together the country's top scientific minds. Oppenheimer forms a team with scientists like Rabi, Bethe, and Teller at the Los Alamos Laboratory, while also collaborating with Fermi, Szilard, and Hill at the University of Chicago. Fermi, Szilard, and Hill achieve the first self-sustaining nuclear fission reaction, known as the Chicago Pile. Teller's calculations suggest an atomic detonation could lead to a catastrophic chain reaction, potentially destroying the world. After consulting with Albert Einstein, Oppenheimer decides the risks are acceptable. Teller tries to leave when his hydrogen bomb proposal is rejected, but Oppenheimer persuades him to stay. At this time, the U.S. struggles to produce enough uranium or plutonium for even one bomb. Oppenheimer is approached by scientists who want him to unofficially collaborate with the Russians, but he rejects such attempts as treason without reporting them to the FBI. Oppenheimer believed in full transparency for scientists during the Manhattan Project, while Groves insisted on keeping information compartmentalized for security. Oppenheimer went against Groves' wishes, organizing cross-department meetings, and faced delays in obtaining his own security clearance. Groves was furious with Oppenheimer for not following security protocols, accusing him of treating the project casually. In 1943, Groves even encountered Jean Tatlock while working on the project. Boris Pash, the security head for the Manhattan Project, was aware of Oppenheimer's communist sympathies. Oppenheimer informed Groves that he misled Pash by fabricating a story about a person on the Manhattan Project being approached by someone from the Russian embassy. However, Oppenheimer didn't disclose any names to Pash. In order to safeguard Oppenheimer, Groves had Pash reassigned to London to monitor the German bomb project. After Adolf Hitler's death in 1945, some scientists in the project questioned the bomb's necessity through the Szilard petition. Oppenheimer believes it could end the ongoing Pacific War and save lives. The Trinity test is successful, and President Harry S. Truman orders the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, leading to Japan's surrender. Oppenheimer wanted Truman to inform Stalin before using it in Japan, but Truman doesn't. The Soviets are threatened, and Oppenheimer believes this initiated the nuclear arms race. Despite public praise, Oppenheimer is troubled by the destruction. In a meeting with Truman, he expresses personal guilt, but Truman blames him for the decision to use the bomb. Oppenheimer calls for restricting further nuclear weapons development, but Truman rejects the idea. Rear Admiral Lewis Strauss, a retired naval officer and high-ranking member of the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission (AEC), recruited Oppenheimer as a scientific advisor to the AEC after World War II. As an advisor to the United States Atomic Energy Commission (AEC), Oppenheimer's opinions stir controversy, especially regarding Teller's hydrogen bomb during the emerging Cold War. Oppenheimer argues that the hydrogen bomb poses insurmountable technical challenges and should not be pursued. Instead, he advocates for controlling the global spread of nuclear weapons. AEC Chairman Lewis Strauss harbors resentment towards Oppenheimer for publicly dismissing his concerns about exporting radioisotopes, which aided other nations in building atomic bombs, and for proposing negotiations with the Soviet Union after their successful nuclear test. Despite Oppenheimer's objections, Truman approves the H-bomb program. Strauss suspects Oppenheimer of collaborating with the Russians during the Manhattan Project, leading to their swift development of a bomb after the war. Strauss also believes that Oppenheimer disparaged him in a conversation Oppenheimer had with Einstein in 1947. In 1954, seeking to diminish Oppenheimer's political influence, Strauss covertly arranges a private security hearing regarding Oppenheimer's Q clearance before a personnel security board. However, the hearing appears to have a predetermined outcome. Strauss, asserting his position as the chairman of the AEC, explains that the charges against Oppenheimer were initiated by William L. Borden, a fervent anti-communist lawyer and executive director of the JCAE, who wrote to the FBI. It strongly suggests that Strauss provided Oppenheimer's security file to Borden, utilizing him to discredit Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer's previous associations with communism are used against him, and testimony from Groves and other colleagues is distorted to paint him negatively. Oppenheimer's decision to bring his brother, a known communist, to work on the Manhattan Project is also held against him. Teller expresses a lack of confidence in Oppenheimer and recommends revoking his clearance, while Groves supports him. The entire review is conducted privately, without a public hearing, and with no burden of proof on the prosecution. Roger Robb, appointed by Strauss, serves as special counsel to the AEC in Oppenheimer's security hearing and has unrestricted access to Oppenheimer's file, while Oppenheimer's attorney is denied access. The board ultimately revokes Oppenheimer's Q clearance, tarnishing his public image and reducing his influence on nuclear policy. In 1959, during Strauss' Senate confirmation hearing for Secretary of Commerce, Hill provides testimony about Strauss' personal motives in orchestrating Oppenheimer's downfall, leading to the Senate rejecting Strauss' nomination. In 1963, President Lyndon B. Johnson awards Oppenheimer the Enrico Fermi Award as a political gesture of rehabilitation. A flashback reveals that Oppenheimer and Einstein's 1947 conversation did not involve discussing Strauss. Instead, Oppenheimer expressed his belief that they had initiated a chain reaction, a nuclear arms race, that could eventually lead to the destruction of the world.